But let's talk now to Lucas Coleman, director of the World Trade Center in San Diego, because Donald Trump has had quite a day, quite a sort of every 24-hour period that he's been in charge since the 20th of January seems to have been pretty, important for the state of the United States of America. He's paused punitive tariffs on Mexico after they agreed to deploy 10,000 troops to the southern border to stem the flow of fentanyl and illegal migrant crossings. Canada is kind of promising to do more as well. So, in a way, all of the sort of the dreaded, tariff nightmares that we're going to be beset upon the world's economic markets appear to have been slightly exaggerated, shall we say. Lucas, very good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. The clock's approaching midnight here, but it's been a very hectic week.
I appreciate you staying up for it. Yeah, I mean, I've got a list here of all the things that Donald Trump has done since he's been in charge, which is just over 2 weeks, right? Over $3 trillion investment in the U.S. economy, border crossings down 95%, mass deportations of illegals, Israeli hostages coming home, DEI programs ended, gender ideology eliminated, and I could go on, but you get the drift. I mean, considering we have a government here that does about one thing every sort of 24 months, this is quite remarkable. He's doing an awful lot of stuff, and most of it seems to be working, doesn't it?
Well, he's certainly been moving with dizzying speed. A lot of it's been done through executive order, and so whether that can last between administrations will be seen. But certainly a lot happening, and the news cycle has been moving very fast in the past couple of weeks with all that you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the tariff restrictions that he wanted to put on people, there was a lot of, shall we say, naysayers, wasn't there, in the last few weeks or last few days as well, saying, oh, this will be terrible for American consumers, it'll be awful for the markets around the world, it'll be really, really bad in the end for pricing. But actually, a lot of what he's done seems to have been, as a short-term economic maneuver, pretty successful, no?
Well, it's to be seen. Some of the tariffs did get implemented or did go into effect today with China. About 10 to 15% tariff retaliation from China is something that we're seeing right now. But certainly for Mexico and Canada, it seems like for a month we've been able to stave off some of the negative consequences. But it's adding a lot of uncertainty for businesses, that's for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, the people that I speak to in America, and I spent a lot of time there, I've got family who live there, they're like, well, if you want to buy a Chinese car, why should it be cheaper than an American car? If you want to buy, Chinese goods, why should they be undercutting the stuff that's made in America? And that's a fairly regular thought for a lot of people, isn't it?
Well, true, but I think an important distinction needs to be made, and one is that not all trade is created equal. And to demonstrate that, 40% of U.S. imports from Mexico actually contain U.S.-made content. So there's a figure thrown around that before an automobile is fully complete and sold to the consumer, it crosses an international border 6 to 8 times. And so in that way, we really make things together, and especially in this binational mega region where I sit in San Diego, California, it's a co-production supply chain. And a similar story can be said about Canada. Now, contrast that with U.S. trade with China, where only about 4% of imports from China contain U.S.-made content. So the nature of the U.S. trading relationship with its North American partners is drastically different from the trading relationship with a country like China, who we have long-term major power competition with.
Yes. No, I think I get that. And I would be more in favour, I suppose, of tariffs against places like China, perhaps more than I would be against neighbours to America. But at the same time, the issue, it seems to me anyway, for Trump is that he's weighing up the trade relationship also with other relationships. For example, the illegal migration that's happening over the border. And if the Mexicans have agreed to put 10,000 troops there to try and prevent that, then that's a plus, surely, for people in San Diego, not least, but also people in the rest of the country.
Yeah, it's interesting because this trade war is not entirely about trade. It is about larger issues such as the illegal flow of migrants, the flow of trafficking of illicit drugs, namely fentanyl, and of course, Chinese power competition. I think in palaces and parliaments around the world, foreign leaders and their teams really need to think about the new power dynamic here in which binational relations are going to be a little more transactional, something that we saw throughout the first Trump administration as well. And they really need to be thinking about what the tangible benefits might be that they can bring to the negotiating table for each particular deal. It's certainly a departure from the way that things were done in the previous administration.
Right. I mean, it seems as well, because of, as you said earlier, the speed with which things are being handled and the executive orders that are being signed off, and that you know, all of the things that many people said he couldn't do that he is doing with some success, must be quite refreshing to an awful lot of people, given that, you know, in the last administration there wasn't an awful lot being done about anything really.
Well, one thing I'll point out is the recent memo around federal funds being frozen. That did cause a lot of panic.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I mean, there are executive actions that can be taken, but the courts did strike that down as potentially unconstitutional. And a lot of states, 22 to be exact, did sue against that. And so they pulled back. So while there are certainly actions that can be taken with dizzying speed, there are also, the federal government is a massive institution, and things do move slower. And to have lasting change, you know, those things are going to require, you know, the institutions to also be on board. But I know, you know, actions are being taken to try and to circumvent that a little bit as well.
Sure. And I think as well, we've seen this in a much smaller way here, you know, the business of the state is very unsubtle, isn't it? I mean, you know, what they should have done was to try and be a bit more clever about what they froze and what they didn't freeze. But I don't think there's many mechanisms by which you can do that. It's either, you know, pay everything or pay nothing, you know, and you kind of get trapped in the kind of mesmerizing administration of it all.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Good to talk to you, Lucas. Thank you very much indeed. Director of the World Trade Center in San Diego.